attachment psychology was developed in the years both before and after World War II. And at the time, the reigning theory of child development was behaviorism. The idea was that kids didn't really have very deep emotional lives. They didn't have deep psychological connections to things, that they were mostly just responding to positive and negative reinforcements in a pretty automatic way. And one of the things that this led psychologists to tell parents is that it's not a good idea to come every time your infant cries, that if you do that, you're just spoiling them. You're giving them positive reinforcement for crying, and so they'll just cry more and more, and they'll end up being dependent on you. And what this new group of psychologists who came along during this period demonstrated was that, in fact, the exact opposite was true. That what infants needed in that first year or two of life was secure attachment with a parent or another caregiver. And when babies got that secure attachment, when they got that attention and attunement and love and responsiveness, they actually became more independent rather than more dependent. It created this secure base from which they could then explore the world. And the woman at the heart of this research was a woman named Mary Ainsworth. One of her great breakthroughs was that it's very difficult to measure the psychological state of an infant. We still have a hard time doing it, but especially in the 50s and 60s, psychologists didn't know how to measure these things. And it was part of why I think there were so many misguided ideas about what infants really needed. And so Mary Ainsworth invented this experiment called the strange situation when she was at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And the strange situation is a pretty weird test. The way that it works is that they built this lab that just looked like a playroom. And a mother and her 12-month-old child would come in, and they'd play together for a while. And then the mother would leave, and the infant would react. And then the mother would come back. And the way that the infant reacted, not when the mother left, but when the mother returned, was an indicator of whether that infant was securely attached or anxiously attached. If the child would run to the mother and embrace the mother and feel either relieved or happy to see her, that was an indication of secure attachment. Kids who were anxiously attached would tend to fall apart in one way or another. They'd ignore their mother when she returned. They'd hit her. They'd look away. They'd have a tantrum of some kind. And what Mary Ainsworth believed was that this attachment style, what she was seeing in the strange situation, was going to be predictive of all kinds of important outcomes in the long term. But I think it's meaningful to anyone that what these scientists have found is profoundly important. This group of researchers from the University of Minnesota were able to test what Mary Ainsworth was not able to test. They did this multi-year study starting in the 1970s with 250 mothers. They started working with them before they had given birth. And they studied them in all sorts of ways to really determine what their attachment style was. And they tracked these kids then through their whole lives. They're now in their 30s, and they're continuing to track them. And what they found was that the nurturing style, the attachment style of the children and parents in that first year of life turns out to be immensely predictive of all kinds of important outcomes. When kids start their lives with a secure attachment, they do better in nursery school. They can pay attention more. They can focus more. They can achieve more. They looked at them when they were in summer camp in middle school, and the kids who had secure attachment were more socially adept. Secure attachment even predicted high school graduation. When they just looked at early attachment style, they found they could predict with a 77% accuracy which kids would graduate from high school and which ones would not.